Hey guys, I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
And we're the Watchmen.
The men who watch.
If it's on a screen, we're watching it and we're sharing it with you. And today we're going to talk about our top 5 favorite sci-fi movies. I'm really excited about this one.
Yep, if there's anything I have always loved in my life, has been science fiction. Whether it's movies, books, television, it's been a part of my life since I can remember thinking.
Yep, and you know, nowadays the special effects are so good now that we've seen so much sci-fi, but you know, it still always comes down to who's got the interesting stories and interesting characters, and I think that's ultimately what transcends okay sci-fi to great sci-fi. So I'm excited to see what is on your list. I know we're gonna have a few probably similar movies, but I'm sure there's gonna be some surprises in there along the way. So you ready to get started?
Sure, you want me to begin?
Yeah, why don't you start with your number 5?
Okay, so my number 5 is Gravity. And if you remember this movie, this was starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. It came out a few years ago. It was sold as a 3D space adventure, and that it truly is. And it was a must-see in 3D. One of the few, I would say, that would be a must-see in 3D. I'm proud to own a physical copy of the 3D Blu-ray, and I have a 3D TV, and I've even watched it at home with my kids. Gravity, to me, was a science fiction film that was real. They followed the rules of space. Kind of the one thing you have to let go when it comes to space is if a spaceship flies through, you hear a big jet engine. But in real space, there is no sound because you need air to make sound. And Gravity followed that rule. And it actually, I think, worked to its advantage because it made space feel very quiet, isolated, and alone. And that was a premise of what the story was all about, is how Sandra Bullock's character has to deal with being left alone through a series of mishaps of space debris that takes out a bunch of satellites and causes havoc. And so that is my number 5. Norb, is there anything you have to say about Gravity?
Yeah, I enjoyed that movie. I did not see it in 3D. I did see it in the theater, nor do I have a copy of that film. However, I did enjoy it. I think what was very unique is, like you said, with the sound, so much being of what you'd really hear in space. What you did hear a lot of was, okay, you know, because there was a lot of just the actors in their suits, or Sandra Bullock in her suit, basically breathing and experiencing what it would be like if you had a microphone inside her suit. So there was a lot of kind of claustrophobic just being inside that mask with her. And I thought that gave you a really sense of being alone and isolated in the middle of what feels like the epic emptiness of space. Let's get off Gravity and let's talk to another one-word sci-fi movie, and that would be the movie Contact. Contact, directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Jodie Foster, Tom Skerritt. I don't know if this is a surprise to you or not, but this may be a surprise to a lot of you because I'm sure it's not on the top of your guys' list and probably not on your number 5s. But Contact if you haven't seen it, it's the story where Jodie Foster is an astronomer, and she basically finds signs of life, of extraterrestrial life through radio signals.
Her name is Sparks.
Her nickname is Sparks. Her name is Ellie Arroway, and she is an astronomer. She finds this radio signal and basically pursues this signal and tries to find out how this alien life is communicating, and the story just kind of goes from there as they implement these communications and plans that they're sending to Earth. And this movie, I love this movie, and I know I love this movie because when we lived together, we were in the house living together at our bachelor pad when this movie came out, and I saw this a bunch of times in the theater, and it just hit me. I've always had a fascination with the stars and space and how things far away, you'd be looking at a star, and that thing's like 5 million light years away, and that means you're looking at light from 5 million years ago, and that stuff fascinates me.
I'm adding music to your description.
And anyway, I just love that movie, and it just, from a fascination with astronomy and the heavens above, it just really hit me in a place where I couldn't get enough of that movie. It made me really ponder and think about, existential, your life existence, and who's out there. And
well, the underline of that story is really a battle between religion and science, which as we know, is a battle that continues today.
Yes, that's one of the strong themes. Is that tear between belief in something heavenly and what you can prove, and and how much do you just give into faith, and that's a big theme of that movie. Loved it. So that's my number 5.
That's a great movie. I completely agree. Terrific film. I have watched it many times, and we sample
parts
of that movie all the time between each other because it just has such great little one-liners.
It helped that we were living in the house together, so we'd run into the, we'd be in the kitchen having breakfast, and I might just say, "Cracker Jack."
You were talking the other day about the famous speech she gives to get the grant, and she talks about this is the most important thing in the history of history.
Yeah. It's a great moment. It's a great speech. I don't think a lot of people have seen this movie, so go do me a favor. You do yourself a favor. Go watch this movie, and I think you won't be disappointed. Contact number 5.
All right, so number 4, it's in a way kind of, I guess you could say it's a little similar, is a movie called Interstellar. And Norb and I are big Christopher Nolan fans. His movies are always really smart, really well thought out. They usually have some great action or science fiction. They've got everything. They're thinking movies, but they're entertaining. He when he makes a movie, he doesn't do it half speed. He goes all the way and takes the time to develop it and make sure it's solid, from everything from the writing to the way it's shot. And he loves IMAX. That's one thing about Christopher Nolan. He loves IMAX, still shoots a lot of scenes with big, loud IMAX cameras. And because he really likes film, but he likes a big image. So you talk about movies being shot in 8K. Christopher Nolan's analog version of 8K is IMAX. But the great thing about Interstellar is that it's the first time, and I don't know, maybe the last time, I'll ever see a movie try to explain the fourth and fifth dimension, and also try to explain the concept of what it means to be near a black hole where time has different speeds, and how if you move into a planet from outside that's near a wormhole, time for you, a year for someone can go by for you in a minute. And that's a really hard concept to wrap your brain around, and I just love the way he tried to create that in a way that you could understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. And Contact was similar in that way, where there's a lot of science involved and explanation, and Interstellar is similar. It is fascinating because when you watch most science fantasy movies, Star Trek, Star Wars, all that stuff is thrown out. You hear all the explosions and the jet engine sounds, the spaceship sounds, and nobody loses time. Everything's happening in real time, of course, for the sake of the movie. But I love that part of the movie where they went down to the surface of the planet and they came back what felt like 30 minutes later, and the guy above had aged like 10 years. And I was thinking, man, for the guy who had to wait for these dudes, that dude was bored out of his mind for a decade while these guys were messing around for a few extra minutes. Every time that went by, it's like an eternity for him. So just that concept alone just kind of blows your mind. Again, like when I think about looking up at a star and it's 5 million light years away, you can't even grasp how far that is. And Interstellar did a good job of creating that, a bit of an understanding of how that works.
And the fourth dimension, which is time, that's a hard thing to try to put on screen. And he got this very creative way to try to get your head wrapped around what that could be.
My only issue with that movie, and like I said, I probably have an issue with every single movie, but my only issue with that one was that when they finally get to, this is a bit of a spoiler, but again, we're letting that go. When they finally did get to the planet they were aiming to get onto, they run into Matt Damon, who's been like in sleep mode for however long. And everything's great, and they finally get there, and you're kind of excited to see what's going to happen now they've finally reached their destination. And instead, Matt Damon kind of goes nutso. He kind of goes berserk, and he becomes like the antagonist, because suddenly now he's kind of this loose cannon, and all stuff starts kind of going to hell when that happens. And
well, what it was is he didn't want to be alone, because they were all sent to different planets to try to find what could be inhabitable, and the planet he ended up on would not be inhabitable, and so he faked the emergency to get them to come rescue him.
Because he wanted company, right? I understand that. But then, then there's a part where, he mishandled the airlock and caused a big explosion, but he's supposed to know all this stuff, so why does he suddenly forget how an airlock works and things like that? So that was a little bit of, I felt like they were just trying to like someone was saying, we need some excitement, guys. Let's have them go crazy so we can have a bunch of explosions and bad stuff happen. So that part felt like just a little bit like we're trying to Hollywoodize this a bit beyond of how they'd handled it up to that point. So that's my only real complaint. Otherwise, I love that movie too. Even my kids liked it. And it's like a 3-hour. It's an epic long movie too.
Well, if Christopher Nolan is listening, Norb, I wonder what he would have to say to you about that.
I'd like to know too. I'm sure he'll comment here and tell me and defend himself.
All right, what's your number 4?
All right, number 4. This goes again back to the days when we used to live together. So this is a much quoted movie between us. But the movie The Fifth Element, starring Bruce Willis, Mila Jovovich, and Gary Oldman. Multipass. This movie has so many quotes. It'd take several pages to write down all the movie quotes we had.
You want
but
some
we've
more?
watched it lots of times. You want some more?
I could just keep going.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like never ending. But Fifth Element was a great movie. Again, I feel like this is one of those movies that not a lot of people have watched or maybe appreciate what it's all about. But this was one of those movies where it had fun, it had funny characters, it had cool action, it had some suspense, but it was just a fun ride all the way through. And this has always been one of those movies that's been a favorite of mine. I do own this one, and I don't think enough people know about it. So I think this is one of those movies that people should go see and when they get a chance, because it's a great film, and Bruce Willis does a great job in it. So one of my favorites. So much fun, so many moments, and hilarious.
Well, and also, I think a lot of people know who Gary Oldman is. He's a terrific actor, but I don't think you've seen Gary Oldman like he is in that movie in anything else. He plays such a different type of character than you're used to seeing him, and he's a memorable bad guy.
He is. And he's, again, one of those characters. Gary Oldman is one where you pretty much, every time you see him in a film, he's probably different from the last time you saw him in a film. He's always got some different kind of take on either the way he looks or the way he talks, and this is no exception. He definitely has a very funny method to his character, and it's like Die Hard. It's like Hans Gruber from Die Hard. He's funny yet very evil at the same time, and it's brilliantly played. So yes, that's just another plus to it. A great bad guy. Can't go wrong when you got a great villain in a show.
So I'll add my one nitpick to this film is that I think the most hilarious thing about this movie is during the opening credits, they're listing all the people, the main stars of the movie, and then it says, and Luke Perry. And then Luke Perry is in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and you never see him again.
Yeah,
I thought, boy, his agent did a good job getting his name as a top bill when he's far from that.
Yeah, I don't even know why they needed to put him in there, because it wasn't like you were going to go see that movie because of Luke Perry. They had plenty of stars. Gary Oldman, Bruce Willis, that was already enough. Those two guys got me.
I'm guessing it's because Dawson's Creek was big back then, and that was a younger group of demographic of people that were really into Dawson's Creek, so maybe that was going to get them to go to the movie. That's marketing.
I suppose so. But yes, wonderful fun film, in my opinion. Mike, what's your next one?
So my number 3, and I'll say that the first 2 of my top 5 were kind of my serious thinking sci-fi films that are contemplative, have deep themes, which I love very much. But I will say my last 3 are just all about the fun. So my number 3 is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
That's what I got for number 3. Woohoo!
I had a hunch we'd have some similars here. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. There's been a lot of Star Trek movies and I'm not alone. It is considered the best Star Trek movie ever made. Not much debate there. That was just one where everything, I think, came together. Nicholas Meyer, I've listened to interviews with Nick Meyer, and he talks about making that movie. And he was difficult. He had a lot of ideas that people didn't like. But sometimes when things like that, conflict happens, good things come out of it. And then, of course, Ricardo Montalban, another memorable bad guy, just as memorable as Hans from Die Hard. You can just, Ricardo, you feel the passion and the anger and the vengeance. And speaking of that, the movie was actually supposed to be called Star Trek II: The Vengeance of Khan, but they changed it to the Wrath of Khan in the final hour, and I think that was a good move. I don't know what you think, Norb. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. I would have been fine with it. Vengeance, Wrath. Wrath is probably easier because it's a shorter word and it's one syllable.
Yeah,
so
Wrath just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. But
so what do you think about this movie?
I remember watching this. I love this movie. It is, for me, the best Star Trek movie that, hands down, that came out. And I think I remember there's moments when you go to a movie theater and watch a movie and you're transformed and immersed and you have a memory of being in the theater and going, I'll never forget this moment because I'm in this world. And this was one of those movies. It was the music from James Horner, the dogfight battles between Khan and Kirk. Just so much about that was everything you love about Star Trek. You know, and you and I were both old school Star Trek fans. And so this was, to me, when the movie started coming out, it was what we all wanted from what we loved about the Star Trek series. Battles, bad guys, just all that stuff on a whole nother level. And so, yeah, that movie was, I'll never forget. I think we were in Reno, Nevada on a trip, and my parents were playing blackjack and gambling, and they said, they knew we were kind of getting bored because we couldn't do anything. So they gave us like $20 and said, here, go watch a movie. And so me and my sister went by ourselves. And I think I was only like 13 years old or something at the time. I went to go watch this movie, and I'll never forget it. It just one of my favorites. And I went to own it on video way before everybody else did. That was my dad was an early adopter of VHS, and so I had a illegally copied version of that movie, and I watched it so many times, over and over and over again. So I know that movie like the back of my hand. And in fact, in my 9th grade history class, I got in trouble because I'd basically by memory made a storyboard comic book of all the scenes during the first battle that they had in the movie. And I got busted because I was working on this instead of paying attention to what they were talking about in class. And he goes, "What are you working on over there?" And I was like, trying to hide it. And he goes, "Let me see that." And he brings it up to the front of the class and he starts reading it. All the cartoon bubbles. And it's the memorized dialogue from the opening battle between, it's very cold in space, all that stuff. And he's reading this thing out in front of my whole class. I'm just so embarrassed, but it was pretty good though. I had the whole thing down by heart. I could write it all down. So embarrassing, but I was proud of myself at the same time. Great movie, had a huge impact on my life at that time.
One last story I'll share, and this is kind of a look back at the way things used to be when it came to filmmaking. Is Spock died at the end of The Wrath of Khan, and it was well known that Leonard Nimoy didn't like being known as Spock, so he only agreed to do the movie if they would kill off his character. So at the end of the movie, I cried, and Norm knows this. I cried a lot because I loved Spock. I mean, I looked up to Spock, and we all did. And when I walked out of the theater, I was just full of sad emotion because Spock was dead. And that was it. He wasn't coming back. There was no plan for him to come back. He ended up coming back. But at that time, it was done. And nowadays, whenever a character dies in a movie or a TV show, I never feel anything or worry. I think, well, they can always bring him back. And so when Spock died, I mean, for watching the movie, even when it finally came out on VHS, I always had a hard time with the last scene because it was hard for me to watch him die. I don't know how you felt about that.
Jim, you better get down here. Bones?
Better.
Hurry. Same exact way. I loved Spock. In fact, before the movies came out, I used to pretend that I was Mr. Spock. I kept a Stardate journal, but I pretended like I had no emotions. I would tell my classmates, "I'm Mr. Spock, I have no emotions." And so when he died, I couldn't believe it. I was like, how could you do this? I was floored. And when I would watch it later, I would still get emotional watching those scenes because even though I knew what was going to happen, I'd seen it a bunch of times, it's the music. It's just the way they executed the filmmaking for that scene was so good that it gets me every time. There's certain movies I can get emotional repeatedly over because it's just so well crafted and well executed, and that is one of those scenes. And yeah, I was a big part of. Spock was a big part of my life too. So it hit me in the same way. Again, these are the types of stories and the reasons why eventually we did become such good friends and eventually filmmaking business partners, because we shared these commonalities of movies and things that really touched us back in the day. So, it stands true now, which is why on this list, why it's no surprise that Star Trek 2 is number 3 on our list.
Well, let's see how we do for the last two.
So, yeah, I know. We might be lockstep in here. We'll see. But your number 2 is?
My number 2 is The Empire Strikes Back.
Great film. Yes.
It's a pretty good movie. I'm gonna guess you've probably seen it, but The Empire Strikes Back is what can I say? Of all the Star Wars movies, my favorite ship of everything has always been the Snowspeeder. I just liked that ship, and I think one reason I liked it is at the beginning of the movie, the way the camera was in the cockpit and you're going over these snowy hills and they're coming right up at you. I remember being in the theater and feeling this vertigo of like I was really flying over these hills. And I can't remember having ever felt that before, having that cockpit view, which was just really cool.
Well, just to add to that, so this actually was my number 1 movie. I put Empire at the top there. So to add to that, this is by far the best movie in the Star Wars franchise, bar none. And the funny thing about this film is that transports you back to my childhood. Again, we were the same age when we saw this movie. And if you had asked me if that was my favorite Star Wars movie, I would say no, because I felt like crap afterwards. I was so devastated the way that movie ended, and it was such a downer. It was so depressing what happened to all the characters. Han Solo's in carbonite and taken away to Jabba, and Luke lost his hand, and the rebellion's on the run. I mean, this is the worst thing that could have possibly happened. But as the years have gone by, and I've seen all these different movies that have come out from George Lucas and the various other iterations, this one, it just, in terms of filmmaking, directing, and all the elements that make a good film, not just a sci-fi film, but a good film, this one is just so well done. The characters' development is awesome. The way they built up Solo and Leia's relationships. Darth Vader, you got to know him on more of a level. Luke and his training with Yoda and the struggles he went through as battling the light side and the dark. So much of that, and I think that's why it hurts so bad, is because emotionally, we were so pulled in to the Star Wars universe with these characters in this film. And I think that's why this one has stood the test of time and has risen to the top in terms of being the best movie in the Star Wars universe. Definitely best one by far.
I will say it took me a while, though, to get used to Yoda, because the first time I saw it, the Yoda part of the movie was probably my least favorite, because I kept just thinking about Grover from
yes.
Sesame Street, and it was hard for me to get serious with Yoda because of the Grover factor. And I think there was less action during that part. And of course, as an adult now, that scene, there's a lot more to it that I can wrap my head around. But at the time of the age, I was still more, I think things impressioned me more that were just, where there was a little more faster pace. So
yeah, I was with you. Yeah, the Grover thing, that's definitely the first thing I thought. It's Grover, but I think after a while you kind of just accepted him, and then he just became, part of the world. So yeah, I agree with you. That there was that little bit of a pulled you out of it for a moment, because Sesame Street wasn't that far away at the time, so you were hearing Grover all the time, and also, what's Grover doing in the Star Wars movie? But
this is actually
got past
good.
That, and like I said, over time,
I think now what can happen here is, Norb, you and I can just have a debate, because Star Wars is my number 1. I'm guessing Empire Strikes Back is your number 1. I'm sorry, Star Wars is probably your number 2. Am I wrong?
Actually, you're wrong.
Okay, I stand corrected.
I will explain though. I'll explain. I actually lumped Empire and Star Wars together.
That's
cheated.
Not fair.
I kind of
That's
put them
not
in one.
fair. Not fair.
Well, they're almost synonymous because they're continuation. But look, let me go to my number 2, and then we'll discuss the rest of the number 1. Okay, my number 2 is Aliens. So Aliens, and I'm surprised you didn't put. I thought we'd be the same all the way through, but apparently not. But Aliens is probably it is the greatest of the Alien, series by far, and it is, I think, still holds up as one of the best monster in space movies ever made. There have been a zillion of them made since, and a lot of them have done well, but I think they all have followed the path that was created by James Cameron in this masterpiece. The combination of space mixed with, military style action, mixed with creature horror suspense and killing, comes together in one of the best films, I think, in the sci-fi genre ever made. And again, this is one that I can never get tired of watching enough of. There's so many great characters in there besides Sigourney Weaver, but Bill Paxton with his, "It's game over, but you put her in charge." I mean, all those things, so many memorable things, but just when he created that device of those little cling, 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 and then they're looking at the little scanner and up to 10 meters and closing, cling, cling, cling. They should be in here right now. We should be able to see them. And they're in the ceiling. I mean, all that stuff. That we've seen that mechanism used so many times. Great suspense builder. And James Cameron did it all, and that was 34 years ago when that movie came out in '86. And so
I think one of the coolest things about Aliens is I think it's the best use of a flamethrower in a movie I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, totally. And it looks like when you watch it, it looks like they're literally just lighting stuff up, and I'm going, how could you just launch a flamethrower in a closed environment like that? But yeah, they made flamethrowers in style. But yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, flamethrowers were awesome in that show. But yeah, so that sits in my number 2. So are you telling me that Aliens isn't on your top 5?
Well, again, I was following the rules and not lumping Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back into one film like you just kind of told me you did. So I was following the rules. So because I was following the rules, Star Wars is my number 1. And I thought a lot about, between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, which would be 1 and 2 for me. And I have to go with Star Wars because without Star Wars, there would be no Empire Strikes Back. That's one reason. Another reason is Star Wars did impression me the most because that was the first time my dad ever took me to basically a PG movie. And I was a big deal. I knew it was a big deal. And when I went, I think I sat on the edge of my seat the whole time. I was still at the age where a movie to me was like the screen was a window and you're just looking through a window at something that's really happening. So my level of fear, excitement was so ramped up in Star Wars. I mean, even a small thing, I was 10 because Star Wars came out in 77. Sorry, I was 11. Is that right? Star Wars came out in 77.
No. You were 8.
Yeah, I was 8.
You were
right.
8.
Sorry.
We were 8.
Doing my math here. So, and when I was 8, I hated needles. And to this day, I hate needles. I don't like getting shots. I obviously do. Just never been a fan of needles. Needles scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. Every time I had to go to the doctor, all that went through my head is, am I going to get a shot? Am I going to get a shot? Am I going to get a shot? And I always had to get a shot, some shot. And so the scene in Star Wars where Princess Leia's in the prison and that just little floaty robot with a needle comes in, I mean, that just, got in every part of my brain and reminded me of my fear. And of course, that makes it memorable. That makes it scary. I mean, and then the door shuts and all I think is, Princess Leia's gonna get a shot just like me.
It cracks me up that of all the things you jump to the first memories of that movie and you bring up the shot droid from the movie. That's hilarious to me. You could have talked about X-Wings and Millennium Falcon. You talk about the shot.
Well, I'm just getting started. That was just my opener. But
okay, all right. It's a funny opener, but I like it.
Due to time, I'm going to have to save the 30 other stories I'd have to tell about why Star Wars is such an important movie to me for another time.
We might have to do a separate show that talks just about the Star Wars impact.
Well, and I would like to do a separate show to talk about how much I didn't like Star Wars Episode 9. So we can save a show for that. And I could go on and on about all my problems. Again, it's such a contrast. I can go on and on about how the very first Star Wars movie was such a wonderful thing and how the last one was so terrible. So, anyway, I'll stop there.
So I've already talked about The Empire Strikes Back. Like I said, I'll even modify my list and take my little Star Wars double naming on there, and I'll just add on to what you were saying about Star Wars. Star Wars is great for the same reason you said. The impact, we had never seen anything like that on screen before, which, sometimes I wonder, is our love for the original Star Wars just because we remember how it impacted us at the time, or is it really because it's that good of a movie? But because it's our opinions and our viewpoint, I will stick with the impact that it was. And it was just because we had never seen anything in our life that looked and sounded like that. And we didn't have the ability to go home and look at it later on YouTube or, pop a disc in. We had to leave the theater and go, I want to go back there. I want to see that again.
And you tried to replay it in your mind.
That's all you could do is replay in your mind. And we had little toys and books that came out and a little film strip that had like a minute clip on there, and I'd watch that thing to death. But that's all you had. And so, the impact was so lasting and yet so fleeting because you couldn't soak yourself in it. I had to wait till VHS came along several years later before I could then rewatch it over and over again. But for those years between 77 and basically like 1980, well, it felt like an eternity. I think I finally had a pirated copy in like 81 or something like that. So for 4 years, I had to just dream about what it would be like, because I only saw it once in the theater. I don't know about you, but going to the theater multiple times was not something we did in our family.
Actually, my dad took me back because they re-released it in Dolby Sound, Dolby Stereo.
Oh, that's right, you did.
So
lucky you got to see it twice.
Yeah.
I only saw it once in the theater at that time, and I had to just live off of that. But it changed my life. Everything was about Star Wars. I was playing with Star Wars toys. I was drawing Star Wars. I was listening to the Star Wars album. And I remember even at one point, my third grade report card, the teacher wrote down, Star Wars art is starting to affect his paying attention in class. It got that much of that's how much it permeated my life. But I don't have any regrets, because so much of who I am now and what I'm into now was because of that movie. So as much as George Lucas has pissed me off since then, I have to always thank him for bringing that joy to us, because without Star Wars, I don't know, our lives would have been very different. So that movie will forever just hold a very special place.
Same here.
So, but I got to ask you though, so even with that following the rule where you put Empire number 2, Star Wars number 1, you're telling me that Aliens dropped out of the list behind movies like Interstellar and what was the other one? What was the other smart one that you had in there? What was number 4?
Gravity.
Gravity. You put Aliens after Gravity? Like, what the heck, man? Aliens. I don't get it.
Top 5s are hard.
What happened?
Top 5s are hard, and I thought a lot about Aliens, but Aliens is not just sci-fi, it's horror and it's action. So it's 3 there. It's sci-fi, horror, action. And I thought a lot about it. I thought, well, this is sci-fi. This is a sci-fi top 5. I decided to focus on movies that were really more sci-fi.
Okay. All right, so it's a categorical thing, not so much of that this wasn't as good as those other movies. Okay, fine, I'll give you that one. That's fine.
Whew,
Agree to disagree. All right, so you got a surprise for us.
This was a long show. We appreciate you sticking with us, and it's time for the surprise at the end. So, along the lines of my Star Wars shirt here, Norb mentioned toys, and so I have to share with you. This was my original X-Wing fighter toy.
Oh, yeah.
From the 80s that I played with like crazy. It's definitely been beat up. There's some Scotch tape there right on the cockpit window because I used to have to tape it shut. You can see hold that up there. The stickers are worn, but it still will retract. You push R2-D2's head and the X-foils lock in attack position. And then you put the button and they close. And it's still got the little landing gear that comes down like that. But this was my toy that I still have in a box from when the movie came out, and I played with it a lot. These actually gun things come off. You could just put it back on like that. Did you have this toy, Norb?
I'll tell you, I didn't have that toy. I had an actual model kit of an X-Wing, so I'd actually put it together. And actually, while that one's more practical, I liked my X-Wing model because it was actually to scale. One thing that bothered me about the toy, those wings are really stubby. I was so detailed because I studied so much about every single thing in those ships. And I looked at it, I was like, that doesn't look right. The wings are too short. It's too stubby. It doesn't quite match the exact schemes versus the model that I got, which unfortunately my parents got rid of it or threw it away or something. I couldn't believe that. But that was more to scale. So I liked the fact that my little very fragile model was actually more to scale. However, I couldn't play with it like that. Mine wouldn't survive.
The TIE Fighter toy was way worse.
I know, that was major. The huge
cockpit
head and like stubby panels. You know, I don't know why they did that. Probably cheaper to manufacture. But I do remember that toy very much. And I wanted more of those toys, but couldn't get them at the time because we couldn't buy everything I wanted. But that's pretty cool that you still have that.
Well, there you have my surprise for the show.
All right. Well, and that brings us to the conclusion of this show, which was our top 5 sci-fi movies. Thanks for watching this episode. I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
And we are The Watchmen.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching The Watchmen.
Please click on here to watch other episodes, and be sure to hit that like button too.
And please subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll always be alerted to any future episodes.
It really helps us out, and we appreciate it.
We'll see you next time. And remember, we'll be watching.